And I welcome everyone, just allowing folks to filter into the room here. Okay, looks like we're getting close to a critical mass. So making the best use of everyone's time. Want to welcome everyone, of course, to the Maryland Department of Planning webinar series. Today we will be discussing building local resilience. Of course, we'll be highlighting supporting state planning and implementation for resilience and some of the strategies which one, the state of Maryland is organizing an approach to resilience, and of course, some of the strategies being deployed at the local level as well. This current webinar is eligible for 1.5 AICP credits. You are able to utilize the CM number there. And it also qualifies for one sustainability and resilience credit as well. So please feel free to note down this information for any recording or submission that you'll be doing afterwards. Before we get into any content, we're just going to briefly move along to housekeeping. Joseph Griffith, so you want to briefly introduce yourself? Talk about
Thank you,
housekeeping.
Clyde. Yeah, thank you, Clyde. My name is Joe Griffiths. I'm the Director of Planning Best Practices for the Maryland Department of Planning. I work with Clyde and oversee our webinar program. I just want to touch base on a few housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar. If you have questions or technical issues, please send them to me in the chat. Please ask questions in the Q&A and share insights or resources with each other in the chat. We definitely encourage cross communications with other attendees, resources you may know of, examples to share in the chat. The panel will be answering questions at the end. We encourage you to submit those in the Q&A, but if you would like to use your microphone to share your question, please raise your hand or use the hand function to raise your hand, and I will unmute you. I did want to also note that certificates of completion will be sent by Zoom following this webinar, but to get your CM credits, you log those yourselves through your AICP account. So thank you, Clyde, and I'll turn it back to you.
Sure. So for our agenda today, of course, we'll be introducing you to what this webinar series is generally about here at MDP. And then we will filter into some of the content here where we'll be discussing what resilience looks like here for the Maryland Department of Planning and our new planning principles. We'll have contributions from our state partners at the Maryland Energy Administration to highlight state support for resilience hubs and some of the programs that are currently set up to advance the concept here throughout the state. Second, we'll have our nonprofit partners at Groundswell to discuss community planning for energy resilience and framework development as well. Then our partners from the city of Baltimore will give us those case studies of the urban context of a resilience hub and work through their process of one, establishing the needs for a resilience hub and how the program has evolved since then. And then lastly, we'll close out with our industry partners at Maryland Energy Administration to highlight microgrids and state energy programs as well. So that wider capacity building for resilience, utilizing current existing state resources. And then of course, we'll close with a Q&A session. Some of our learning objectives for today, we want to make sure everyone is able to identify those community needs and signs of hazard. For when you are creating your preparations and your planning processes, what are those hazards, those acute shocks and disruptions which you want your community to be best prepared for? We'll identify some of those local risks and that strategy for implementation. Will identify funding sources, of course, from a lot of our state partners. But if there are other different sources, alternative funding sources, which some of our resilience hub implementers have been able to utilize throughout the state of Maryland, we'll be diving into some of that as well. We want you to be able to recognize the components of a resilience hub it's a national concept, and all over the country, you're seeing different examples of resilience hubs be produced. Of course, we're here focused on the Maryland example, and of course, the Baltimore City example of resilience hubs as well. So we're hoping that some of this information that we're sharing with you can help inform your own development of a resilience hub concept, and of course, organize the planning processes to develop and implement resilience hubs. And then one of the last objectives we want you to have is identifying those stakeholders. So who are the folks that should be included in the room in the planning process or the decision making to make sure that your resilience hub or your resilience strategy is as inclusive as can be and is able to deliver and provide a wide range of services to those communities that are most in need. I'll briefly introduce myself. My name is Clyde Drayton. I'm the lead resilience planner here with the Maryland Department of Planning in about month 8 at this point. So it's been a fantastic experience being able to contribute to the department here. Here at MDP, I coordinate a lot of the different resilience activities for the department, whether that's serving on interagency work groups or providing general perspectives from the Department of Planning that also leads into supporting the development of best practices and guidance resources for incorporating resilience into planning activities. Prior to working here at MDP, I served in New York City, working on tunnels, bridges, and terminals for resilience as well. To highlight what MDP's role is for incorporating resilience. Resilience is a practice that has been entrenched in state of Maryland's practices for a long time. But of course, we're working and on advancing the planning principles here within the Maryland Department of Planning, which is a newer initiative or an evolution of the previous 12 planning visions, but is a step to incorporate newer concepts for our comprehensive planning process here at the state of Maryland. So these are the 8 planning principles in which we're moving forward with. These are to be effective in October here in the state as well. So the overarching principles here are land, transportation, economy, housing, equity, ecology, resilience, and place. Some of these are the consolidation of previous planning visions, and some of these concepts are newer, such as the equity principle or the resilience principle. Kind of just briefly overview of what these principles consist of. For the land principle, of course, it's ideally working with optimizing working landscapes and working with existing infrastructure and facilities. And you will see here on the right side of each of these tabs, the primary metrics or outcomes in which we would like each principle to deliver on. The transportation principle, of course, prioritizing transportation networks. For housing, of course, ensuring a mix of quality housing and advancing housing affordability throughout the state and the different types of housing as well. Economy, utilizing those existing structures for adaptive reuse and mixed use to ensure the highest maximum use throughout local communities. And equity, and ensuring that all sectors are included in the decision-making process and lending voice to diverse communities when it comes to plan development and prioritizing the needs of underserved populations. Place, providing for public spaces, encouraging social interaction, and protecting natural resources and natural, cultural, and historical resources. Ecology, protecting and restoring sensitive ecological systems. And then lastly, we'll discuss the resilience principle. And the words exactly integrate resilience measures to minimize the impacts of rapid and unexpected natural and human caused threats. So here for the resilience principle at the Department of Planning, we really do look at the 3 separate outcomes of improving human well-being, mitigating climate change, and growing economic opportunity. So the 3 metrics that you see here on the right side of the screen are just a preliminary way of us thinking about how we will kind of track and measure what resilience looks like for the state of Maryland. Of course, Maryland is not new to a lot of the unique challenges of the changing climate currently, whether it be extreme precipitation, rapid sea level rise, or different scenarios such as human-induced threats, whether it be massive infrastructural collapses or accidents, which may happen as well due to human error. So for us here at MDP, ideally we want to track resilience within our comprehensive plans. So here, every 10 years within the state of Maryland, according to each jurisdiction and county, they submit their comprehensive plans in which MDP would like to see in as a part of the new 8 planning principles, the incorporation of the resilience principle. So ideally, understanding how local communities are preparing for the future as it relates to natural and human-induced threats, and incorporating or aligning their visions of their future growth and development, along with considerations for the changing climate. One of the other outcomes in which we are advancing here within MDP is flood resilience in the built environment. So how are we looking at our local jurisdictions and municipalities for how they set standards for flood resilience? Do they have different criteria for their additional freeboard? Are they working with different standards for their elevation or their building criteria in areas that are that face flood hazards? And then the final outcome that we are advancing here is just tracking the funding awarded for local energy resilience projects. So the energy crisis is something that Maryland is quite familiar with and is a growing challenge for many states across the nation at this time. Here at the Department of Planning, we would like to have our local governments understanding how many dollars that they are receiving for building energy resilience, and of course, maximizing the current opportunities at the state level with state funding resources to incorporate as much energy resilience as they are capable of developing towards. And lastly, kind of highlighting the larger picture of resilience at MDP. As I mentioned earlier, we do support our interagency partners as they develop their own strategies for resilience. And we have provided resilience reviews here at MDP for massive documents or publications and programs from our partners who would like to see the planning perspective of resilience reviewed, their documents reviewed for the planning perspective. There's local government support. So of course we communicate regularly and organize regularly with local governments throughout the entire state. But of course, we also provide direct assistance, technical assistance for local governments, and providing those next steps as folks look to advance solutions for their unique resilience challenges. And then lastly, our best practices development is a strong suit here at the Department of Planning. We develop guidance and resources which support the advancement of resilience into all planning activities. So this is capacity, which MDP has a long history of, and that usually consists in webinars, online resources. We host planning commissioner trainings and different kinds of opportunities for local governments here in the state of Maryland, and of course for a national audience to be able to hear on the best practices that the state of Maryland is advancing and the ways that resilience is may be advanced here within the context of the state of Maryland as well. We're going to move along to our panelists here. So we, as I mentioned, we do have a full slate. I will welcome David Comies to come onto the presentation. Please feel free to introduce yourself and dive into your presentation.
Hi, my name is David Comis, and I'd like to take a couple of minutes to give you my take on resilience. I'm a control systems graduate from the U.S. Naval Academy. I also have a master's degree in management and a second master's in energy policy and climate change. I've commanded a nuclear submarine, served as a project manager for the design of a naval ship, and headed up the Navy's global search for science and technology. I've also been a solar program manager at the Maryland Energy Administration. In fact, I've been the program manager since 2016. When I started work, I noted that the city of Baltimore had a solar plus energy storage grant through the Maryland Energy Administration Game Changers program. This was a precursor to a program that I wanted to implement, specifically to develop resiliency hubs. Of course, it wasn't the name of the program that I was proposing, but my name got shut down. So we accepted the resiliency hubs name that was being used by Baltimore City. As such, in 2018, I developed a Resiliency Hubs grant program at the Maryland Energy Administration. I used some information obtained from the Clean Energy States Alliance, but all program requirements were my own, and they were based on my research and program vision. Only much later, like in 2023, was the Resiliency Hub grant program codified into law. Next slide. Okay, and next slide. While there are many definitions of resilience, this is how I think of it. You build in resilience when you engineer and operate a system that provides defense in depth against significant challenges, be they physical challenges like the weather, procedural challenges like defenses against cyber threats, or simply the ability to ride through the incidental failure of equipment. If something does get through, a resilient system will be able to reconstitute itself and provide desired reconfigure and provide required services only after a brief interruption. Often this means that the system reconfigures itself to protect itself against the malfunctioning equipment, but it does continue to provide services to as many customers as possible. During the first minutes of grid outage, everyone just waits for power to come back on. But what if the outage is extended and you don't have a car and public transportation isn't available? This is a situation that could be faced by low-income households, both in an urban and a rural setting. After a while, the cell phone is out of power. Expensive, temperature-sensitive medication goes bad. Security is compromised, and on extremely hot and cold days, people need heating and cooling to survive. Under the Resiliency Hub grant program, resiliency hubs are designed to provide these critical services to low and moderate income neighborhoods. From the neighborhood's point of view, the reliable source of power provided by a solar array with a properly sized battery allows the resilience to safely cope with the loss of electrical power until outside help can arrive. From the county's point of view, it gives them more time to restore utilities to critical facilities before people in these neighborhoods become in extremis. Next slide. There are many layers of resilience, many of which you can do nothing about. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the Independent System Operators, or RTOs, deal with the high voltage transmission grid. The Maryland Public Service Commission and the utilities work hard to ensure the electrical distribution system remains reliable. The Maryland Department of Emergency Management and the County Departments of Emergency Management and/or Planning address matters closer to the public to include shelters. And then there's this new entity, the Resiliency Hub, that provides respite care, a place where electricity remains available and temperatures remain reasonable. Shelters and resiliency hubs should be developed by county governments and building owners. Next slide. The requirements of a resiliency hub are focused around three major goals. The first goal is to keep people from needing the emergency room. Certain people, such as the very young and the very old, are very sensitive to the heat and the cold. These people may need to keep in temperature-controlled spaces as much as possible. Some people require electricity to operate durable medical equipment. When the power goes out, these people normally head straight to the emergency rooms at their hospitals because it is normally a reliable source of energy. Unfortunately, this tends to clog these emergency rooms with people who really are not having an emergency. And as such, the resiliency hub is required to be sized for the likely loads from portable, durable medical equipment like oxygen generators, CPAP, stuff like that. The second goal is to keep people safe. To do so, the resiliency hub has necessary interior and exterior lighting needed to provide safety. It provides sufficient energy to charge cellular phones and small computers to keep people connected with society and to emergency management. The third goal is to prevent unnecessary economic loss. As such, the Resiliency Hub has a small refrigerator to store temperature-sensitive medications. Unfortunately, there normally is not enough energy to provide refrigerators for everybody's refrigerated goods. The objective would be to keep the Resiliency Hub open 24/7 during the grid emergency. However, some felt this was unobtainable. As such, a compromise was reached where the objective is to remain open 24/7, but the requirement is to remain open at least 14 hours a day, although these hours do not need to be consecutive. Next slide. The Resiliency Hub must include a renewable energy resource paired with an energy storage device, primarily because the money behind the Resiliency Hub program must be used on renewable energy systems. To date, all proposals have been for solar PV systems paired with batteries, but that's not a requirement of the system. It must be able to island from the grid and then reconnect to the grid, although this may be through a manual rather than through an automatic process. The Resiliency Hub must have at least 50% probability of lasting 3 full days at this modeled electrical loading. We do not provide the use of backup generators when desired or needed, but we will not pay for them since this money is for for renewables and not for fossil fuels. A facility seeking this fund must agree to remain a Resiliency Hub for at least 5 years. Next slide. Since the underlying assumption for a Resiliency Hub is that people in neighborhoods don't own cars, the hub must be within walking distance from the low-income neighborhood being served. The assumed load must include lighting for safety and security, plug loads such as cell phones, small computers, durable medical equipment, and I'd bet a Game Boy or two gets charged also. A small refrigerator for temperature-sensitive drugs, and enough heating and cooling to prevent serious health effects. I normally equate this requirement to expect a temperature range of between 65 and 78 degrees. I mentioned the Game Boy and the durable medical equipment because one of the lessons learned from the long-term destruction of the power grid on Puerto Rico was that when solar and battery systems were made available to the public, some of the power was used for entertainment in the form of a small television and durable medical equipment, often and mostly CPAP machines. Next slide. The Resiliency Hub program started in 2019, with the remainder of the Resilient Maryland program starting in 2020. To date, 2 Resiliency Hubs have been completed, Scotland Drive Community Center and the St. Jude Middle School. 3 Baltimore churches and 1 job center are in the final stages of construction. 13 multifamily housing community rooms are in the design and development phase. We did not put any restrictions on where a Resiliency Hub could be. As you can see, they could be in multiple different locations. Next slide. Let me give you a brief case study. St. Jude's Middle School, it happens to be a Catholic school, was the first Resiliency Hub to go online. The study determined that the total load was approximately a constant at 13 kilowatts. As such, it needed about 130 kilowatts of solar and about 420 kilowatt hours of energy storage to meet its need. You'll notice on the next slide that the requirement for this was 5 days and not 3 days. During the first year of the program, we had set the requirement at 5 days. It subsequently became 3. The hardest part of a resiliency hub, believe it or not, isn't the technical design, but it is determining the required loading profile. Without any good examples, everyone tended to founder. The key is to know the community and to determine the hours of operation. The second hardest determination is how to do the heating and cooling. In many cases, the rooftop air handlers are designed to provide HVAC services to large spaces. They have large motors with monstrous starting currents. In most cases, the energy storage device for a resiliency hub cannot provide the starting surge, which is normally 4 to 6 times the running load. There are workarounds, but they tend to be very expensive. If the rooftop air handlers cannot be used, then the facility needs to identify other means to heat and cool the spaces, such as window air conditioners or small 1.5 kilowatt heating towers. Next slide. The size of the space is a function of the size of the population that is likely to use the spaces. If the resiliency hub isn't designed to be a shelter, it is assumed that people will spend some time at home also. As such, not everyone will be using the hub at once. If the community is sick and/or elderly, there may be more durable medical equipment than in a normal population. All of these things go into the load determination for the resiliency hub. Once the loading is done, various programs can assist with the equipment sizing and determination. The general rule of thumb for a 3 to 5 day resiliency hub is if you have a constant loading in kilowatts, you can multiply that times 10, which gives you a pretty good estimate of the amount of solar capacity required. And if you multiply that number by 3 or 4, you get a very good estimate of the amount of energy storage requirement. St. Jude's will benefit from the free solar energy every day that the solar system is in operation. And it benefits from the energy storage when the grid is down. For those that are interested in the Resiliency Hub program, we will pay about $3,000 per kilowatt of solar. And that includes the solar, the energy storage battery, the rewiring requirement, the new breaker, any type of charge controller. That's all wrapped up into that $3,000 per kilowatt of solar. And we normally put a cap of $500,000 on any given grant, which means about 130 kilowatt system. I'd be happy to answer your questions during the Q&A period, and I thank you for your attention. I'm now going to turn it on over to David Wright from Groundswell.
All right, thank you very much, David. Appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Wright. I'm the VP of Technical Services at Groundswell. A little bit about my background. I've been in the sustainability, green buildings, and clean energy space generally for almost 2 decades now. And I've been with Groundswell for about half of that time. And I lead I oversee our project development work and a lot of our resilience-based initiatives, which I'll be talking about today. And Clyde, I just requested control, so hopefully that goes through. All right. So let's see if this works here. Great. Okay, I think it's working. Quickly, just about Groundswell, just give everyone a quick overview here. So Groundswell is a nonprofit based in DC. Our mission is to build community power to improve local resilience for everyone and to cut electricity bills in half for our neighbors who need savings the most. So we use a combination of community solar, resilience hubs, and energy efficiency to preserve affordable housing, to strengthen the grid, and to support local economic development. We have programs that deliver tangible benefits across the Mid-Atlantic, in the Heartland, and across the Southeast. We leverage our Soulmate data platform to enable scale, and we're on track to deliver some lofty goals here that you can see on this slide by 2030. So our lane is clean energy, and I wanted to just give a little bit of background on how we operate in the energy resilience space. So the first thing on this slide is community energy resilience planning, and that's kind of what I intend to talk a bit about today. We'll talk about this research project funded by the U.S. Department of Energy. I will also just flag for awareness and context that Groundswell is also engaged in Resilience Hub project design and feasibility analyses, as well as project development and construction. So we have sort of a spectrum of roles that we can play in the energy resilience space. And we've partnered closely with MEA over the years. David Comas has been a great champion of energy resilience and resilience hubs. And I will say that we are just about to begin a new set of feasibility studies for prospective resilience hubs in Central Maryland and in the Eastern Shore. So welcome anybody who might be interested in participating in that or learning more about that. Feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'll have my contact info provided at the end as well. All right, so moving right along, the project I wanted to share about today is one that we're just wrapping up. Groundswell's been working on this for the last 2 years or so. Again, funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, the Solar Energy Technologies Office. The program within CETO is another acronym, RACER. It stands for Renewables Advancing Community Energy Resilience. And that is a portfolio of funded projects across the country. Ours is focused on Maryland specifically. The name of our project is Resilient Communities Maryland. And the objective for this whole project was to develop a framework that is driven by communities for basically understanding and informing decisions about where to place resilient energy infrastructure. And as I mentioned, our lane is clean energy. So that's kind of where we sort of play in this space. But our approach for this project was to really go in sort of more broadly and not sort of with a designed solution in mind, but to just have a conversation with community members about energy resilience more broadly, and to develop a way for them to engage in a subject matter or a subject that most folks are not intimately familiar with, and design a process and a sort of framework for ways to do that that can be used ultimately to inform energy resilience investments. We looked in 3 different areas across the state. We wanted to focus on an urban environment, so we looked at Baltimore City. We also chose Montgomery County for a more suburban context. And then finally, we looked at the rural Eastern Shore to have that rural perspective as well. And I would definitely be remiss if I didn't shout out our partners on this work. The National Renewable Energy Lab, or NREL, was a key partner, as was IECA Solutions Incorporated, a family-owned environmental consulting firm. So again, as others probably will do in their portions of the presentation, I wanted to just start with the definition of resilience. For this work in particular, you can see the definition here, the sort of formal definition offered by the National Renewable Energy Lab. What we're really talking about is mitigating the adverse consequences of power outages. And we're not just talking about a 5-minute power outage, we're talking more about longer duration power outages, hours and days. So just to kind of align around a definition of resilience for this particular initiative. Okay, so the challenge that, well, there are several challenges with this work. One of the challenges is that really the consequences of power outages themselves are caused by disruptions to the services that electricity provides. So it's not so much the electricity in and of itself, as we all know, it's the hot showers, the cold beers, et cetera, that people really care about and relate to. One of the challenges, though, is that industry metrics, at least traditional energy resilience metrics, do not identify the kinds of services that are affected by a particular outage, where those services are offered, and or how long those services may be impacted. So essentially, the consequences to customers that result from these outages are not, there's not a good way of capturing those in traditional energy resilience metrics. Because power outages, as you can imagine, can decrease a community's access to healthcare, to fuel, to safe indoor temperatures, and to provisions like food and water. In addition, traditional energy planning processes are generally quite technical, opaque to most folks who are not experts, and there are no well-established processes for obtaining meaningful community input from the actual residents of communities that might benefit from energy resilience investments. Our work on this project was inspired by a 2021 paper that found that meaningful participation in energy resilience planning is sort of achieved when two key criteria can be met. One is that stakeholders outside of the energy fields are involved in planning investments. And two, that the participants' input is actually used to inform real decisions about energy resilience infrastructure. So that means that in order to have this process be effective, you have to have a transparent method of engaging communities, and one that is understood by community members, again, who may not have much familiarity in this space. So these are some of the animating questions for our work. What if we could prioritize infrastructure investments based on the degree to which they enable residents to meet their needs, not just on their physical attributes of the infrastructure? How can we effectively solicit meaningful engagement and input from residents and do that in a systematic way? So capturing their qualitative data about their lived experiences and their local knowledge, and then pair that with more quantitative information that utilities and planners are more used to and need in a lot of ways for their planning processes. And then finally, how can we empower community members to participate meaningfully in decision-making processes within and for their own communities? I'll try to be quick here just in the interest of time. One of the solutions that we landed on here is a metric around critical service access or accessibility. And that measures the relative access to critical services to households during normal conditions and also during major disruptions to the power grid. So basically, critical service is calculated by looking at the value of certain services as defined by community members, how well or how much a service is provided in a particular area or location or building, and also the ease of access to that to each household in a particular study area. So how nearby or how far away is that particular service? And looking at critical service access in this way allows us to move beyond just a binary designation of certain locations as either critical or not critical, which is sort of more of a traditional way of looking at it, to more of a spectrum of how critical each service is and for which customers. And this can be done at a variety of scales. It can be looked at for a single household. It can be aggregated across neighborhoods or across entire feeders to understand how the electricity-dependent services support resilience in a specific area over time. I'll just keep going here. There's a little bit more background on the metric and how we calculate accessibility. I won't go into the math here, but essentially the key thing to know is what we ask community members when we have them in the room. What services do you need? Which locations provide those services that are nearby to you, and how well do they provide them? And then how hard is it for you to access those locations or services? Those are sort of the foundational questions. And there's more to it than that, but I wanted to give you a sense of the types of lines of questioning. Again, I'll just kind of quickly go through this slide. There's a little bit more on the metric. I do want to talk about the research approach here because this part is critical for our work. We used a community-based participatory research approach, or CBPR, which is all about positioning community members as equal partners in all phases of the research process. And this is really where we had great input and direction from our partners at IECA Solutions, who are well established in this space. And we used their framework, the framework that they designed to help us engage both local residents who are not sort of quote unquote experts in energy resilience, and also more traditional experts, or at least folks who work in the space, who sort of wear official hats and engage in that way. So the groups that we, there were two primary groups that we convened for this project. One we called the Resiliency Council, which was limited to just community members only. The idea here was to create a safe space where community members could voice their ideas and avoid any sort of power dynamics that may arise when other more official actors may be in the room. So there was a lot of education here, a lot of background about what is energy resilience, what does it all mean, how does it relate to your personal life, and then document their lived experiences with power outages, what are their needs and preferences, and what do they care about in terms of service access. The other group that we convened is called the Stakeholder Roundtable, which was essentially just building on the Resilience Council. So the Resilience Council was always in the room, but whenever we had the Stakeholder Roundtable, we also brought in a group of officials, representatives from local government, from utilities, local colleges or universities. And so that was the space for where folks could all come together. The voices of the Resiliency Council could be shared, and the official representatives could offer their perspectives and insights, and in some cases engage alongside Resiliency Council members in some of the activities that we outlined. So again, a big part of our project was sort of designing a way to engage these Resiliency Council members in thinking about energy resilience so that we could use their insights and preferences and knowledge about their local neighborhoods to sort of incorporate, well, we would incorporate their feedback into ways that could be used for informing investments. And so there's a whole host of activities that we designed. You can see a couple of examples on this slide, including, literal maps of a literal neighborhood with locations pre-identified and then asking for their feedback on those locations, as well as more sort of theoretical exercises evidenced in the lower visual about the duration of power outages. And if you look at certain services over time, how would a power outage impact your, how critical essentially would that service be to you if a power outage were to continue, from 1 hour to 5 hours to 12 hours to 2 days, et cetera, because power outages can be a dynamic thing, and we wanted to try to capture that as well. These were just a quick summary of some of the results that we have from our project. And again, we sort of just wrapped up our period of performance for DOE. And so we're in the process of compiling everything and putting it all together in a format that can be shared out, because we very much intend to do that. I did want to just share a few initial sample results so you can have a sense of what we're looking at. And this is where we start to map community feedback to geographical context. And so the map on the left shows critical service access for households in Baltimore City. Now, again, critical service access is a unitless metric, but it's useful in just making comparisons. So you can see sort of the downtown region has a more densely service-rich environment where services are closer together. I'm not sure if I can go backwards here.
Sorry, David, just gonna have to ask for about 30, 40 more seconds, and then we'll move on to the next.
Okay. All right, so I'll just keep going here. We can also look at a power outage in Montgomery County, where the bottom line in dark gray is the number of customers that have been affected by a power outage. So that's sort of your traditional metric. But then the new sort of metrics that we're adding in here are the different colored lines on top, which represent different service categories. And you can see how the access to those services drops in it at the same time as the power outage seems to occur. And then you can see that the restoration pattern looks pretty different than the number of customers that were impacted. That result looks pretty different in Montgomery County than it does in the rural Eastern Shore, which I'll flip to next, where you can see there are fewer service locations. People have to travel farther to access those services. And so obviously the shape of these restoration curves looks pretty different. It doesn't get back to close to baseline for several days following a power disruption. And finally, all of this stuff is going to be shared on our website and through other avenues, but you can go to this website for now to get a sampling of some of the templates and resources that we've created through this project. And we hope that it's useful. We want it to be useful, and we welcome feedback and questions, both today, of course, and then going forward as well. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. Thank you. And Clyde, I think I'll pass it back to you.
Yes, and just be sure to release the control of the presentation back. So Valerie, we'll be having you speak now. If you just want to test out your mic, I think we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. All right. I'm just waiting for my slides to come up. So I know we're running a little late, so I'll kind of skip over my credentials and just say that, my background is not so much in the energy side, but more in community engagement and public lands, and looking at various sustainability and resiliency issues. Next slide, please. So you can skip to the next one as well. So I'm with Baltimore City's Office of Sustainability, which is in the Department of Planning. So we are actually a place where the community resiliency hubs were pioneered over 10 years ago. So what we're talking about in this section is really the resiliency hub program in Baltimore. As David mentioned briefly, there is a model specifically for Maryland. Ours predates that, so it is a little different. And as this model has been replicated around the country and actually internationally now as well, each jurisdiction does it a little differently based on their local needs. So just, what we call a community resiliency hub here in Baltimore, how we refer to those as their trusted service-based nonprofit community organizations, often faith-based organizations that have strong leadership and are located in under-resourced neighborhoods. They partner with us in the city to provide essential resources and community support during times of crisis. The community resiliency hubs serve as a space where vulnerable neighbors can gather in times of emergency. They can access reliable power for their essential devices, receive supplies, food and drinking water, store medications, among other things. They also are often used as community-based staging areas when emergencies are occurring, and for recovery personnel, as well as conduits for critical supply distribution to the community. Next slide, please. So this is just, as I mentioned, a few examples of the way the hubs function and have, served their communities in Baltimore. Next slide, please. So the agencies in this city of Baltimore that are involved in this are Office of Sustainability, which is the office I work in, and the Office of Emergency Management and the Health Department. Currently have around 20 hubs, and you can see they're scattered around the city. We do try to prioritize them being in frontline communities, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, this program was pioneered in Baltimore over 10 years ago, and it's actually a direct result from our disaster preparedness plan. The city wanted to ensure that people in Baltimore had access to resources and recognized that working with community partners would increase trust in the likelihood of people to access resources if information and other resources were provided by those known community-based organizations. To date, our partners have not been recruited. The community resiliency hubs, they have come to the city with an interest in gaining resources to share with their communities. None of the hubs only as hubs in Baltimore. They provide a variety of services and resources to their communities and opt to include being a community resiliency hub into their normal operations. So oftentimes these hubs are staffed by volunteers or, some staff people and volunteers, a mixture of the two. While they collaborate closely with the city, they self-identify and promote their resources to their communities. That's something that they very much value, so they can reach their communities directly. Next slide, please. Just a picture of some of our hubs in action. Upper left-hand corner, you can see actually that's one of the sites that Dave Bright mentioned, and that is with their plans for solar there. To the right there of that, there's some community planning exercises, also some cisterns and some distribution of resources, some food resources during the pandemic. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our program's around 10 years old. So we did some assessment and some site visits, and we learned that, the hubs are really well respected in the communities of the people who know them, but there was really inconsistent awareness of them, that the hubs themselves really desired to have increased capacity to add additional resources to their communities, and that many of the facilities were having some issues, everything from not having solar and backup, energy efficiency issues, and some of them even had limited ADA compliance. Also, we looked at our needs as the city, and looking at OEM and Office of Emergency Management and the health department both sought to identify more committed partners, able to respond to communities during, the increasing extreme heat events we're having and other emergencies. And that not all frontline communities in Baltimore have community resiliency hubs, or that they're well dispersed throughout the city. Skip 2 slides, please. I know we're trying to make up a little time. So as a result, what we did was we decided to just take a look at our program model and outline a little different framework for it moving forward that would structure the program to help the hubs increase their capacities according to their needs and desires, because that's something that's very important to us, to keep it as a meet them where they are approach. And that the Community Resiliency Hub network should grow to increase the reach of program resources to communities in need. Next slide, please. So some characteristics of updated model. We wanted to create a clearly organized structure that interested community-based organizations could be a part of, while also adding the support to the hubs that wish to offer more resources to their communities. As noted, none of the hubs are only hubs, so they have other programs and services. So we need to be able to structure something that could meet the organizations where they are and help them to increase their resources as they choose. This is especially important because many of the hubs, as I mentioned, are staffed by volunteers. So their ability and willingness to respond during different types of emergency varies by hub. And knowing that we'd like to expand the program to more locations, it was important for us to communicate expectations from both the city and of the hubs, and allow each of the hubs to serve in the right role for them here and now, but also to help them be able to get the resources they'd like to be in the future. So, we looked at, we've done everything from streamlining our inquiry and application process, outlining roles. We're developing a pretty robust training schedule now so that folks can get their volunteers and staff trained in different ways, and also technical assistance, developing plans for them, from emergency plans to also work plans, so they can advance to be able to get different resources. And then, of course, looking at these also help to put together some clearer goals for fundraising for them as well, so they can tap into some of those resources that MEA and others are offering. Next slide, please. So briefly, what we did was we put together a system that has 4 different types of community resiliency hubs moving forward. So all of the hubs are equally important and play those valuable resources. However, some have or plan to establish greater capacity to offer more resources and services. So this is where these categories came from. So folks can fall into those, and we can scale our training and technical assistance accordingly. I'll review them in a little more detail. I know we're running short on time, so we'll make sure to share the slides that have a little more detail on each of the characteristics and trainings and resources and so on that are offered on each of the types of hubs. But just to make it clear, we see the information hub, information center is the first one. That one, any characteristics or requirements that would be of an information center, that would also be the limited function activated site would have those. And then, of course, anything from the limited function activated sites, the multiple function activated sites would have those. They kind of just build on one another. Next slide, please. So the baseline requirements for all of those, we did establish some of these as well. So, again, the first three have been core to the program since its inception. They're established community resources, they're safe, accessible, welcoming spaces, and they communicate information from city partners to their communities. But we've also added some other things with input from the Community Resiliency Hub managers themselves, based on lessons that we've learned over the last 10 years. So we're conscious not to add too many requirements because we wanted to make sure that we don't hinder participation. But again, that level system actually, provides folks a place that they can fall into based on how much capacity they have. But this means that, we now, because of this, we do now require multiple contact people, some specific trainings, that are emergency focused. And then of course things like having an emergency operations plan, a communications plan, and then of course becoming an active member in the network itself, because we've seen a lot of success in working on fundraising and different opportunities as a group together. Plus there's a lot of informal mentorship and connections that are made in those groups between those community organizations as while they're participating in the network. Next slide, please. So the information centers, just very quickly, these ones are primarily focused on disseminating information to communities. So this helps to ensure people receive accurate information and reduces the likelihood of the spread of disinformation because the messages are coming straight from the city and then delivered by a trusted community anchor. When possible, they may distribute other resources or open their doors to provide space for people to charge phones or store items during power outages, but that's not required of this category. Skip to the next slide, please. The limited function sites have a little bit increased capacity and more physical resources that enable them to respond during power outages and other events. So they're expected to open their doors to community members during certain emergencies, for instance, like extreme heat days. And can provide access to restrooms, climate-controlled facilities, and refrigeration. So they require a little more training and equipment on site, such as first aid training and a defibrillator. I'm going to skip 2 slides. That's going to make up a little time. So then the multiple function activated sites, these hubs have a more formal role in responding to emergencies, and they will have an MOU with the city. So they are expected to they're also expected to invest their increasing their capacity to respond and to reduce their carbon footprint both on and off their campus so that they can be a good example and really raise awareness around climate resilience and different strategies for mitigation to their communities. We'll skip 2 slides as well. The comprehensive activated sites, these hubs also possess an MOU with the city, and these ones are really the ones that are the most comprehensive. We have yet to have some, but some of our sites are interested in going this, moving towards this model, where they would even be able to provide shelter or act as a joint information center. Next slide, please. No, so then it's like one of my slides is missing. Let me see. Here we go. All right. And then it looks like, I apologize. It looks like one of the slides crossed here, but just really briefly, we can go to the next slide. I'll just quickly mention, we do have right now something that I want to mention, which is moving forward with this, some of our hubs, 16 of them, we have funding from FEMA, and MEA has actually provided matching funds for several of the sites to be outfitted for solar energy and backup generators. So that's a little over $7 million project that will be concluded by about this time next year. So that's a big step in getting these hubs able to respond to those different types of emergencies and function throughout the year, even off grid. We also will be conducting energy audits at those sites, also through MEA funding. So thank you very much for that. So that we can be looking to increase the energy efficiency in these. But as you can see with these models, as we're working to tier them, we can see what the different types of hubs and which are looking to aspire to in terms of resources, so that we can be working with them to be securing funds to get their physical sites to that capacity. We're also going to be, over the next period, really looking strategically at where our hubs are located. We're going to be working on a definition for frontline communities in Baltimore to really look at those characteristics, so we can make sure that we have all the neighborhoods in the city served, that we can with that. So I know I had to go through this a little quickly, so I will turn this over, and we'll have a little time for questions and answers afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I do want to note for the audience that we have time until 1:30. So we just have one more presentation here. Emma, if you want to, feel free to come on and begin your presentation, but we'll have another presentation for about 7-10 minutes, and then about 20 minutes or so for Q&A until 1:30.
Thank you so much, Clyde. Really appreciate it. Hey, everyone. My name is Emma Stoney. I'm an energy program manager here at MEA. And in addition to some of the other programs I am running a couple of our resiliency programs. So I hope that my presentation answers some of the questions that folks had. It also is going to cover some funding opportunities that we have for folks. So if you could go to the next slide, Clyde. And the next one after that. Okay, so there are a lot of definitions of resilience. David, my colleague, presented one earlier today, and this is the one that I typically use of systems that promote resiliency measures that minimize the impacts of rapid and unexpected natural and human-caused threats on communities. So that's really the lens that we're looking through when we talk about resiliency. And for this specific presentation at the Maryland Energy Administration, we're talking about energy resiliency. Clyde, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so we offer two different programs at MEA that focus on resiliency. The first one is our residential and commercial battery storage program. This was previously a tax credit program. It is the same structure, but it is just a slight different funding mechanism. We're doing it as grants instead of a tax credit. So you'll get a grant from MEA. We have a portal where residents and businesses can apply for a non-competitive grant at a fixed rate and get a battery storage system implemented at their property, either residential or commercial property. And then we have our Resilient Maryland program, which is a much bigger, loftier program. David talked about it in his presentation. This is a competitive program, and it has 3 different areas of interest. It's a bulky program, and I will go into each one of those. It's really for this installation of solar plus battery storage, although David did mention, which is a good point, that even though solar and battery storage is the most common renewable energy source we see paired with battery storage, it's not prohibited. The program is not prohibited to just solar. So you could do another renewable energy source. It's just not very typical. Could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so I'm going to talk about the residential and commercial battery storage program. The purpose of this program is really to help residents and businesses increase their resiliency by having backup power capabilities. This is for when the grid goes down, you have that battery backup. Instead of it being a traditional diesel generator, it is a electric battery. So it can power your home or power your commercial business up to what you need for operating low when you don't have power. So these grants are awarded non-competitively. We will cover up to 30% of the total battery storage system. Both the purchase and installation costs are covered. The maximum award, if it's over 30%, is $5,000 for residential properties and $175,000 for commercial properties. This is, parametered by statute. So unfortunately, we don't have any ability to expand or change those parameters. Some of the benefits, though, of this program are that, if you're a homeowner, you have power continuity, you have safety, and you have that seamless switch. It's really nice. The programs that these battery storage systems can enroll in, you can not only enroll in time of use, which means that you can offset the time that your battery is is using, you know, the peak power, you can offset that. So you can charge your battery during non-peak hours and then turn off your use of the grid during peak hours and use your battery instead. And that helps people save some money. And there are a lot of utilities that are offering those programs. Some benefits for businesses are things like uninterrupted operations, which does lead to revenue protection and then asset protection. So all great things. This program is also open right now as it's non-competitive. We are awarding grants as we receive them. So we are processing them as we get them. You could go to the next slide, Clyde. Okay, now I'm going to talk about our Resilient Maryland program, which was talked about by David a little bit. He goes into all the technical stuff as our engineer on the team. And to his point earlier, and Valerie, the previous presenter, this program really was inspired by a lot of the work that was done in Baltimore City. The Resilient Maryland program is intended to be a ladder style program, with step one being this pre-construction and planning. So if you are a city or town that is thinking this sounds like a really great idea, but there are a lot of logistic challenges that come with figuring out how you're going to have either a microgrid to support your essential infrastructure or a resiliency hub to support your community in a power outage. Pre-construction planning helps you figure out not only the technical design, but it also helps you do that stakeholder engagement, that figuring out how are we going to actually staff this resiliency hub, what are we going to do, and how is this going to operate successfully? Can we operate 24 hours? Can we only operate 14 hours? What is our ability? And then also figuring out the location, you know, where is the best location for a resiliency hub in your community? So the capital support program and the resiliency hub program are very similar. The capital support program is just for microgrids, meaning that there is no public facing requirement for the facility to be open to the community during a power outage. The resiliency hub program is a microgrid that does also have to be open to the public during a power outage. So while there is no requirement that an applicant has to go through Area of Interest 1, this pre-construction and planning grant, to then go to the next stage. It is definitely recommended, and we do have, you know, the information that you're supposed to be getting from this pre-construction planning. We want you to have, you know, a budget, feasibility analysis, all of that. So you otherwise have to demonstrate equivalency to having all of those things, essentially having your ducks in a row to start construction in the next phase. Clyde, can you go to the next slide? All right, so now I'm going to go into each of those areas of interest. Like I said, the program's divided into 3 parts. The first part is this pre-construction planning. The purpose of it is to help folks who are thinking about a microgrid, a resiliency hub, but really don't know where to start. The grants are awarded competitively as 80% of the cost of this feasibility and planning study. And through this program, we have 5 different deliverables. They're listed here. And I see I'm low on time, so I'm just going to rush through. I know that folks will have this presentation later, so if you have any questions, you can also email us. If you could go to the next one. All right, area of interest 2 is that capital support for microgrids. This is so organizations can invest in resilient clean energy systems that can maintain service during power disruptions. We'll award up to 50% of the total cost, which can be up to $150,000 for microgrids. We do also have lower numbers for resilient facility power systems and CHP systems, which are combined heat and power. Those are, that's a fossil fuel system. That's why we're kind of gearing away from it. We tend to see more microgrids come out of this program. If you go to AOI 3, please, next one. Okay, and now we have our Resiliency Hub program. As David mentioned in the previous, in his presentation, these are awarded competitively as $3,000 per kilowatt of new solar, up to $1 million. The requirements are it must be open to the public as a resiliency hub for 5 years, and it must have the ability to be open at least 14 hours per day, non-consecutively for a 3-day period in an emergency grid outage, or have that 50% probability. If you could go to the next one. Okay, and these are some statistics of, you know, different types of industries that have applied to the program or gone through the program. As you can see, local governments are a huge one. We see counties, towns, and cities really looking at this program. We also have multifamily housing and nonprofit communities, nonprofit organizations looking at these programs as well, but it is pretty spread across. And I think that's the end of my presentation. So go ahead, Clyde, I will give it back to you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation, Emma. And thank you to all the panelists for all the great information that you've shared. I think I'll invite everyone to kind of come off camera, all of our panelists, and we'll open it up for Q&As. I see that some have been mentioned in the chat already, but I do want to reiterate for the audience here that this presentation will be shared with the audience and distributed. And in addition to a lot of the content that was shared from our panelists as well, the Maryland Department of Planning host a Sustainable Growth Network meeting. The next one will be September 4th from 11 to 1 p.m. And we'll make sure that that information is shared out for everyone as well, as we look to get more involved with what the resilience offerings are here at MDP. So Joe, I know you've been looking at the Q&A in the chat. I don't know if there's just one question you wanted to start us off with.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Clyde. We have quite a few questions in here. Hopefully we can get through them all. I'll try to go through them as we receive them. And I want to thank those panelists that responded to some directly already. And so we'll go ahead and get started. I will try to combine if I can, but they're a variety of questions, some of them pretty tough. Richard Canio asked a question very early on. I appreciate him for his patience, but I'm kind of interested in the answer to this one. Do you think development of small nuclear facilities created to meet the needs of one data center is practical at such a scale? I'm not sure who might take that on.
This is David Comas, having been a nuclear engineer. Yes, it is practical. The question whether it's economic is a different issue. The question of whether you're willing to go pay for the expertise that's required to go run a nuclear facility. But yes, we've developed nuclear power plants for something as small as NR1, which was a miniature submarine, to a ballistic missile submarine with hundreds of kilowatts, so megawatts. So yes, it's practical, maybe not economic.
Thank you, David. Eric Tiso is asking about what's the tie-in with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, or how do some of these work alongside their programs and objectives?
This is David again. I normally do not work directly with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. For resiliency hubs, we do require that the applicant have spoken to either the county Department of Emergency Management or their Department of Planning, whoever does that function, and that there is no veto. The whole point is to go prevent things like I'm putting this resiliency hub in the middle of a floodplain, or is in the middle of something that we're about ready to go bulldoze that and put in a freeway. So we require that type of no veto, but we are not directly tied with MDEM.
Thank you, David. Next question is from Lee McNair. Are there any panelists thinking or others thinking of things like food, drinking water, trash, or the ability to reasonably clean, especially if the emergency lasts for more than a few hours? Emma?
Yeah, this is Emma Stoney. I can speak to that a little bit. So when it comes to our resiliency hub funding, we only are able to support, like, I think it's like $1 million or 1.5, maybe what we can do in the future. It's not necessarily the amount of the cost of the facility. And our funding is typically just for the capital support part, but in your planning and pre-construction of actually looking at the facility being a community public facing program, we do expect that there is coordination with other stakeholders, other nonprofit organizations, other community-based organizations, faith-based organizations to help with these things, because it is definitely, as you know, being with the Department of Planning, it's a holistic approach. So our funding doesn't require that they do this because ours is capital planning, but it is something that we do expect of the resiliency hubs to like at least have a plan for that sort of thing. I don't know if Valerie, as her experience, can speak to that a little bit. Sorry to cold call you.
Oh, no worries. And I actually wanted to respond to the previous question a little bit as well, because, at a local level within Baltimore City, we work with MDEM, with different funding opportunities and so on. Within the city itself, not so much with the state level, but we work with the Baltimore Office of Emergency Management. They're actually one of the co-leads of agencies on the Community Resiliency Hub program here. So we work very closely with them, and they're very active in getting everything from trainings to the resiliency hubs, also, to getting water distribution to them, for the extreme heat days and so on. So I just wanted to, so I think it varies a little bit, the state program, and then sometimes locally, there might be some different interactions with the emergency management offices. In terms of things like, cleanup and so on, that is part of where we're developing these emergency management plans with them. So, there is some consideration of that. A lot of these sites, do have pretty robust programs, where they're, have composting on site. Some of them have community gardens, things like that. So some of those pieces are already there, but again, they vary site to site. So, that is something we're kind of looking to get a little more standardized. Also, those sites that, as I mentioned, in that new system we've developed, the ones that would have MOUs with the city, there'd be a little more formal arrangements with things, some considerations like that, because they would be having that increased capacity that if OEM, our Office of Emergency Management, were to ask them to activate, they would be online for that time. So, there's different considerations for different ones. And, again, going back to our new model, for instance, the information centers might not have as much because they're really distributing information. Whereas the ones that have, open their doors for, people to store medications and things like that, there would be a little more increased capacity for, consideration of those different aspects.
This is David. I'd like to go take one other swipe at that. One of the projects, City of Refuge in southern Baltimore, was waiting for an additional grant that came through the city of Baltimore, so that they could increase their battery storage and they could therefore keep all of their refrigerators up. City of Refuge is an excellent example of one of these facilities that has a larger public facing mission than just to keep people hot and cool. They also do feeding.
Thank you. A lot of voices on the answer to that question, so that's great. I wanted to point out one thing. I see a few people are dropping off, but before everybody drops off, our Secretary Flora requested that we mention that we have a Sustainable Growth Network meeting coming up on September 4th. If people are interested in statewide collaboration on the principles that Clyde mentioned earlier, just sustainable growth in Maryland, I'm just going to quickly put the link to join virtually and more information about that meeting in the chat for everybody. And then we'll continue with our questions. Let's see. I think, this is from John Serrano, is there a public resource available, and this might be in the slides, I may have missed it as I was monitoring the chat, available that outlines all the requirements for a center to be designed as a CRH? Is that in one of the slides that we'll be sending out?
I don't know that anyone had, David Comas probably spoke most directly to that question. I would say though, the requirements will differ depending on who you're talking to, right? Like MEA has particular requirements for projects that receive MEA support. But I would say, generally for the state of Maryland, at least to my knowledge, there's not sort of a standard set of quote unquote requirements, more sort of a conceptual framework for what a resiliency hub can and should do. I will point folks maybe to the USDN, the Sustainability Directors Network has a good kind of overview of resilience hubs. That's a good resource. I can try to drop that in the chat, and other folks may have other ideas as well. Yeah, Valerie has.
Yeah, just to tag on to the USDN, actually, there's we're only in the third session, but it's going to be a continuing group that actually Baltimore City and Minneapolis are co-leading. That is a support group for community resiliency hubs. So, it's an opportunity to connect with folks from across the country to ask, startup questions to, very broad questions for functioning programs. So, it's just a great resource for if you're interested in your jurisdiction, getting involved in, or just have some questions. It's a great networking opportunity, a lot of educational opportunities involved too. And that's, if you're a USDN member, that's free for anybody in your jurisdiction to join into.
I think I want to expand that question and connect it to one that's also in the chat. But David, with requirements, I know Groundswell works with other states as well. If you can just think of any other requirements from working with other states. And also there was a question of shifts at the federal level for funding for energy resilience and things like that. If there's any comments that you may be seeing from that and the other panelists as well.
Yeah, well, I would just highlight the Maryland and particularly MEA's approach, and the city of Baltimore as well has been a leader in this regard, but to standing up resilience hubs, both from kind of for the city, at least a city kind of supported, but really like looking to community organizations to lead and step up and volunteer as resilience hubs. I think that's a fantastic model. And then MEA as a state agency supporting resilience hubs and having consistent funding for both pre-development activities like feasibility studies, and then also for construction. That model I think is really powerful. So we've been talking about that wherever we go. I think Maryland is really leading the way in that regard.
Okay, the next question is specifically for you, Valerie, or at least they were called out. So here you go. How do you plan for staff to work at a resiliency hub? This is Adrian Mao, interested in developing neighborhood spaces at a few locations to pilot the idea either at empty storefronts or city property, for example, a transit metro station.
So actually, it's interesting because that's something we're just starting to talk about, is potentially having community resiliency hubs in city facilities. Our model has not been that to date. It was really based on that approach of having the trusted community anchors be the hubs, and we do continue to do that, but we are also looking at considering, maybe some public facilities as well, especially for some of those higher tier ones where, there'd be a need for potential, bed space and, reunification centers and things like that as we move forward. Also, that kind of advances our climate action plan where, we have a call to try to make more of these city buildings solar ready or solar equipped. So we're, it's something we're contemplating, but we haven't done that. There are many cities that do use public facilities for their community resiliency hubs, libraries, rec centers, things like that. DC also has a really interesting model where they have one giant central community resiliency hub that is operated, through the city itself. So, it varies pretty widely how different jurisdictions handle it, so that's, again, that's something that we talk about a lot in that USDN group, but, our model to date has been, and we will continue to always have, community-based organizations involved in those. So we haven't had any particular sites that are, operated by government to date, but or vacant storefronts either. We haven't had that. They are all places that are, open for various purposes. The community resiliency hubs being one of those.
David?
This is David. I'd like to just put in a plug now that says that the Resiliency Hub grant can be used by counties. It can be commingled with a county desire to build a new shelter. Resiliency hubs are not shelters per se, in that they're not required to withstand adverse weather conditions. While they're not required to, that a city shelter may be required to. But counties and cities are the lowest form of government that would know the people best and are probably some of the best people to decide where where resiliency hubs should go, even if that is not in a county building. And I agree with Valerie, the trusted partners are key to doing this.
Thank you. So this next one's a pretty big question. And I thought, Clyde, maybe you could talk a little bit about the Resilient Maryland strategy and potentially in response to this. So what is Maryland doing to plan for resiliency hubs for everybody? Even well-to-do folks need access to durable medical equipment, refrigeration, heating, and cooling. Should developers of new housing be required to provide resilient energy systems and a hub for new neighborhoods? How can these hubs be used to improve community coherence and resilience when there isn't a power outage? So I know there's a lot of questions in one, but I guess if you could focus on the first one there, if share any insight. I know we're looking at the Resilient Maryland strategy now. I don't know if you've seen any of the strategies for resiliency hubs in that.
I think I'll kind of divide an answer into two parts. I think one, advancing resilience for everyone. Of course, here at MDP, we do have our planning principles and the comprehensive plans, and that is a regular process in which we receive comprehensive plans from jurisdictions and municipalities of all sizes. So it can be a very small town of around 345 people, or it can be a major municipality as well. And so I think when we are looking at incorporating resilience, we're also keeping in consideration the scale in which resilience may be most applicable or most applicable in general. So if you do have a smaller municipality that maybe doesn't face the as drastic of an impact or as much damage as anticipated that you would see with a much larger or a much larger at-risk county or jurisdiction, then of course we won't grade or provide suggestions with the same amount of weight, but we do want to help support all of Maryland's jurisdictions and municipalities achieve their 10-year plan to make sure that they're where they live is able to, one, be safe, stable, and grow as much as they desire. And so incorporating resilience into the comprehensive plan is in full alignment with making sure everyone is represented throughout planning activities throughout the state. And then the Resilient Maryland strategy is coming out of the Office of Resilience with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. And that is what we understand as an overarching resilience document or guiding a resilience strategy for the state of Maryland, in which the agency has been coordinating with most of the state agencies to develop a unified strategy for one, addressing resilience at the state level, implementing the different actions and strategies, and of course, advancing some of the state of Maryland's own policy and goals for resilience as well. And so the programs that we're sharing, one from MDP and also from some of our partners here, our panelists here, will largely be folded into a resilience strategy and highlighted. And then when we discuss things such as resilience hubs, of course, that's a specific task and measure which it is to be advanced. And that work will, of course, continue on. But I don't know if any of the other panelists had a response. David?
First of all, there's not enough money to go do resiliency hubs everywhere. Second of all, the money that we have for resiliency hubs comes through the Strategic Energy Investment Fund and is normally tagged as having to be only for low and moderate income communities. So right now, even if we had gazillions of dollars in there, we still wouldn't be able to do it in a West Potomac or in a high income community. The money isn't allowed to be spent there.
One thing I would just like to say is that, the program from the state with that model, that might be the case, but there are a lot of places around the country that are doing them in different types of neighborhoods and different income levels. Really our program, we raise funds for projects, but we really honestly operate without a budget. We just, staff time, of course, but that's it. So there are opportunities to do that in higher income areas. It's just a matter of, how you structure it and, if they qualify for different funding. But there are definitely examples all over the country that are doing that in different income brackets and so on.
Okay, I'm going to end it with somebody who just raised their hand. This will be our last question. Apologize, we might have to go a little over, but I apologize to others who didn't get their questions addressed. Please, you have the emails of everybody here. We'll be sending out this presentation, and you can and ask them your questions. So this is for Sakura. I'm going to allow you to talk. You are hold on. No, you should be able to speak now. You might have to unmute yourself, I think, or ask. All right, there we go. I asked you to unmute. Well, it's like I still have some things to learn how being these hosts for these things. It's saying ask to unmute, which I've done. Let me see. Promote you to panelist. Let's try that. Well, I apologize for that. So we are at 1:30. Sakura, you can give it another chance if it's working. But yeah, we will be sending out this presentation to everybody. You'll have their contact information. Please feel free to send your questions to them, and they will get back to you with their responses. And we appreciate everybody joining us. Look for more webinars from the Maryland Department of Planning, and in partnership with our partners, the Mid-Atlantic Planning Collaboration and the Maryland Department of Transportation in the months to come. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day and week. And particularly thank you to the panel and Clyde.